You scan your badge. The door opens more slowly than you expected. The lights in the hallway are down to half. The elevator is empty. There is no conversation. No one turns to look at you as you walk in. On the desk, the Bloomberg screen is still glowing, and it is not clear for how long. Next to it is a cup of coffee that has gone completely cold. You sit down, reopen the model, and adjust a line that, in truth, no one asked you to adjust. You stay later than necessary. Later than the hour when an ordinary person would tell himself that enough is enough. And none of this is about your job. You think you are trying to make things more precise, but what is being tested is not the final result, not the number, not the file you are about to send. What is being tested is what you do when you see that there is still a small distortion left unresolved. Do you leave? Do you allow yourself to let it slide? No one says that to you directly. No email spells it out. No line in the training process mentions it. But you are still sitting there, and in some way, that has been noted. You still think this is a career. You learn quickly. You handle data well. Your quantitative foundation is strong enough that numbers do not intimidate you. You write clearly, not in a showy way, but clearly enough that other people can use it. You are not the kind of person who walks into a room and has to leave a mark. You do not try to make people remember your name. You believe that if your analysis is tight enough, if your logic is sealed enough, if you let no errors slip through, sooner or later, someone will notice. The rhythm of your life begins to repeat until it is almost soundless. Data, model, draft, revise, send. Wait for feedback, usually much shorter than the amount of time you spent writing. Some days, what comes back is only a few words. Some days, just a sentence with no emotion in it. You read it, you do not react, you do not feel insulted, you do not feel the need to defend yourself, you just continue. Not because anyone forces you to, but because you believe this place is not like the outside world. You believe there is something here that is stricter, deeper, more real. You did not come here to become famous, not to build a name, not so that other people would know who you are. You came here because you believe that what happens in these rooms touches reality in a way that most of the world only ever sees the consequences of. Never the core itself. And you accept not being seen as long as you are close enough. You believe there is an order behind all of it, a logic, a path, a system that, if you are serious enough, precise enough, durable enough, will open. But this is where it breaks. This is where things begin to drift away from what you thought they were. You think you are being evaluated directly, but in truth, you are not. No one is sitting there counting the hours you stay in the office. No one really cares how many lines you revised. No one is assigning points for the level of dedication you display on the surface. This system does not look at effort that way. It does not look at hard work as a moral quality. It looks at how you handle a problem when there is no clear guidance. It looks at whether your judgment holds when no one is standing beside you to show you the next step. And that does not appear in any performance report. What you write also does not travel straight upward the way you once thought it would. It always passes through another layer first, then another one. Each time it passes through, it is compressed, cut down, revised, placed into a larger logic that was not originally yours. Sometimes your idea survives. Sometimes the core of the analysis remains intact, but your name does not necessarily travel with it. And when you think that if you do well enough, there will eventually be some clear moment of recognition, you realize this place does not work that way. There is no scene where someone stands up in the middle of a room and says, "You did very well." There is no ritual of acknowledgement transparent enough for you to hold on to. Instead, somewhere, a question is raised in a room you are not in. Someone asks who wrote that section. Someone else asks what your name is. Or perhaps no one asks at all. And whether your name is mentioned or not, in the right room, at the right moment, is enough to alter the direction of what comes next for you. This place does not function like a normal job. It functions like a filtering chain. From competence to trust. From trust to access. From access to influence. You're not really climbing. You are being filtered, one round at a time. And each time you move forward, fewer people remain inside that circle. You are not in a place where the best people are automatically seen. You are in a place where only the people trusted at the right time are pulled deeper in. Once you understand the rules, the levels stop looking like promotions. At first, you are very close to the data, closer than anyone outside. You see things before they are made public. You learn how to read them, clean them, check them, then rewrite them in the language this system accepts. But the authority to interpret them at a higher level still does not belong to you. Your job is not to produce some major discovery that will impress people. Your job is to write clearly enough, cleanly enough, solidly enough, that someone else can take it and use it. That is your advantage. You are inside the system. You have access to something many people outside can only guess at. You learn the rhythm of the research flow. You become familiar with the internal language, with the way an idea is packaged so it can move forward. But in return, no one owes you recognition. If what you do is not used, then in practical terms, it almost never existed. At this level, repeated precision matters more than any personal spark. No one needs you to be surprising. They need you not to distort the system. You are closer to power than in many other jobs, but at the same time, you are almost invisible. You are not noticed, not named, not retold as an exception. You are only allowed to continue if you do not create errors. Then something changes. Not loudly, not clearly, no marked moment. Just a part of what you wrote gets used. No one tells you graciously how far upward it went. No one sends you a record of acknowledgement. But you feel the rhythm of response shift. A door does not fully open, but it is no longer closed the way it was before. And so you move forward. You begin to have a portion of the work that is truly yours. An area clear enough for you to be responsible for. You do forecasts. You prepare policy briefs. You present in smaller, more closed rooms. And for the first time, you are questioned in a way that is no longer ceremonial. Not a polite question. Not a question meant to broaden discussion. A question aimed directly at the weakest point in your argument. You answer. Not perfectly. You know that. The person asking knows it too. And in that moment, the game changes shape. No one remembers how many times you were right in the months before. What they remember is how you responded when you were pressed, at the point where you were not yet fully certain. You have more presence than before. Your technical voice begins to carry more weight. But at the same time, each small deviation begins to mean much more than it used to. A slightly loose assumption. A frame that is not fully sealed. A point you overlooked. All of it now becomes signal. The pressure no longer comes from the sheer volume of work. It comes from the fact that you no longer have a place to hide inside obscurity. And if the system begins to believe that you can see what needs to be fixed before it breaks open in the room, you move forward. At some point, you stop looking at the surface. You begin looking at the places where the system might crack. Not in headlines, not in public statements, deeper than that, in balance sheet structures, in the chain reactions of liquidity, in places that still appear calm even though the strain has been building there for a long time. You write warning notes, you build scenarios, you model the path of risks that most other people do not yet see taking shape. There are times when you see exactly what is about to happen, and then nothing happens. No major shift, no proportional response, no immediate pivot. The system does not move at your speed simply because you saw the problem. You look back at the data afterward, it keeps moving in the direction you described. You raise it again. One more time. More polished, more careful. It is acknowledged, but still not acted on. And here, you learn something unpleasant. Being right does not mean being heard. Being right too early sometimes looks, from the outside, more like being wrong than being right. The system absorbs warnings at its own pace, according to its own inertia, according to its own tolerance, not according to the urgency you feel. You begin to see more than before, wider than before, deeper than before. But at the same time, you also begin to see clearly that you control less than you once imagined. That helplessness is not an accident. It is part of the structure. Until one day, something you wrote a long time ago is pulled back out of the archive. They open it because reality has now arrived exactly where you once pointed. And by then, your position has already changed. You are no longer only doing analysis. You begin controlling how analysis enters the conversation. That difference is enormous, even if on the surface it sounds like only a career step. You no longer write to prove that you are right. You write so that what you write can be used in a real decision. Every sentence you keep, every point you trim away, every paragraph you place higher or push lower, quietly shapes the direction the discussion will take. You are no longer only producing content. You begin managing the framing. You have more authority. But you also lose something. You are no longer allowed to write like a scholar. You are no longer allowed to remain absolutely faithful to every nuance in your head. You are writing for a room you do not fully control. A room with limited time, limited attention, and people weighing things that no model can fully weigh. Here, clarity beats complexity. A very beautiful argument that cannot be used is almost worthless. A sharp insight that does not enter the decision also stays on the page. You begin to understand that this system does not reward things simply because they are good. It rewards things that can operate. And once you begin deciding what will be emphasized, what will be softened, what will be introduced at the right moment, you have already left the purely technical level far behind. You move closer to the center. You are no longer only preparing material. You begin influencing how the issue itself is understood. You stand exactly between data and decision. The buffer begins to shrink. There is no longer much time to try and then revise. No longer the luxury of leaving an analysis sitting for a few days and returning to it with fresh eyes. Everything becomes tighter, faster, heavier. A single small detail in the data can completely change the way the entire room sees the larger picture. And then you realize that the most important thing does not necessarily sit inside the model. It lies in how quickly you can read the implications of that model before anyone else does. At this level, you see very clearly a distinction that you once unconsciously collapsed into one thing. Correct data is not the same as correct interpretation. You can have perfectly accurate numbers. You can have a clean data series, a sound model, reasonable assumptions. But if you place it into the wrong structure of the problem, the conclusion is still wrong. Here, a framing error is more dangerous than a calculation error. You are closer to the center. But the risks are sharper too, thinner, harder to rescue. You are no longer competing by knowing more. You are competing by seeing in advance what other people have not yet found the words for. And when you are no longer just preparing for the decision, but quietly beginning to shape how that decision is weighed, you move forward. Then you reach the level where things go outside. They are no longer inside the room. It no longer exists only inside memos, drafts, or closed-door meetings. What you say begins to take on a life of its own. It goes outside, it gets interpreted, it gets watched, it gets reacted to, it gets cut loose from context, it gets tied to things you do not control. You vote, you speak, you stand in meetings whose consequences travel far beyond the room where the decision was made. Trading desks read every word, markets measure every beat. The press waits for every slight deviation in how you speak. Language is no longer just a tool for communication. It becomes a tool of power. You learn how to speak with great precision, but you also learn how not to say too much, how to leave enough meaning without opening too many doors to interpretation, how to keep your language clean enough that it does not betray you after it leaves your mouth. And then you realize something almost brutal. The higher you go, the fewer things you can know for certain. Power rises, but uncertainty rises with it. If you go farther still, to the place that from the outside everyone assumes is the peak of control, you realize you do not control outcomes in the way people imagine. You only manage their uncertainty. There are no longer any mistakes made in silence. Every sentence has consequences. Every pause gets read. Every word has a price. You have the greatest power. But you are also the most isolated. And it is there that everything becomes clearer than it has ever been. And that is when the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. By this point, you begin to see something you can no longer look away from. Nothing improved. Only the constraints changed. You did not escape pressure. You only changed the kind of pressure you live under. At the lower levels, pressure is workload, late hours, the feeling that you have to prove you are not making mistakes. At the next level, pressure becomes precision. It becomes an assumption under scrutiny, a question that touches the weakest point in your case. Higher still, pressure no longer sits inside the analysis itself. It sits in the consequences of how you speak, how you frame a problem, how you stay silent at the right moment or the wrong one. The same is true of invisibility. You do not escape it. You only change its shape. At first, you are invisible because no one knows who you are. Later, people begin to know you, but they still do not truly understand you. Then, there comes a point when you are understood, heard, followed, but no longer able to say everything you know. A different kind of invisibility, more refined, more expensive. The same is true of risk. You do not escape risk. You only change its nature. At first, risk means a wrong number, a missed variable, a skipped step. Later, those errors still matter, but they are no longer the most dangerous thing. What becomes more dangerous is misunderstanding, misreading the structure, misframing the issue. A conclusion placed in the wrong position can distort the way an entire room sees reality. You think you are advancing, but in truth, you are only exchanging one kind of limit for another. At every level, you optimize the wrong thing. You try to optimize title, as if title is what opens doors. But title is only a description of where you stand, not what allows you to go farther. You try to optimize income, as if salary is the clearest proof of progress. But income does not automatically give you access to the important rooms. You try to optimize being right, as if being right is enough. But being right has never been enough to be heard. You try to optimize visible effort, as if doing more will make you more visible. But surface-level effort does not make it through the filters. This system does not react most strongly to those things. It reacts to something else. It reacts to whether you can be trusted, when no one still has time to verify you step by step. It reacts to whether you can maintain clarity as pressure increases. It reacts to whether what you create is genuinely useful to the people above you. And above all, It reacts to whether the judgment you make can retain its value after passing through layers of revision, interpretation, and pressure. You are not lacking ability in the ordinary sense. What you may be lacking is something that can survive being filtered. And when you look back across the whole path, you understand that nothing truly became better in the simple way people like to tell the story. Only the constraints became more refined. From something crude and easy to see to something hidden and difficult to grasp. From a visible limit to a limit buried inside the structure. From a problem that can be named immediately to one that only reveals itself after you have been inside it long enough. That is when you finally see that you misunderstood it from the beginning. So the story was never about ambition. It was about misunderstanding the game. You once believed that hard work would move you upward. But hard work, most of the time, is invisible. No one truly measures you by how late you stayed. No one builds your position out of how hard you tried. Effort is only input. It is necessary, but it does not turn itself into leverage. It does not automatically convert into power or access or trust. You once believed that income reflected progress. That sounds reasonable. A number that rises year after year. A sign that seems obvious. But then you realize that income barely touches the core of this game. You may be paid more over time. But that does not mean you have moved closer to where real decisions are formed. What changes your position is not money alone. It is your distance from power. The degree to which you are trusted. The degree to which you are brought into conversations that others do not get to hear. You also once believed that promotion was a relatively clear path. Do well, get recognized, move up. But reality does not operate that neatly. There is no complete map, no transparent set of criteria that lets you relax and believe that if you do A, B, and C correctly, then D will follow. The biggest turning points do not come from a beautiful achievement neatly recorded in your file. They come from your name appearing in the right conversation, in the right room, at the right time, under the right tone. You are not being held back simply because you have not worked hard enough. You are being held back because you misunderstood the kind of system you are inside. You think that if you do enough, well enough, long enough, you will move upward. But what you are confusing is labor with leverage. This system does not reward you in any simple way for doing more. It rewards you for becoming someone who can be trusted, while everything is still unclear. At the highest levels, the structure gets simpler. Not easier, just clearer. You know exactly which part you truly understand. And more importantly, you know which part you cannot know for certain, no matter how long you have been inside the system. You no longer rush to prove yourself. You are no longer driven by the need to be seen at any cost. You no longer think that having your name mentioned is the objective. You focus on only one thing now, something much more reduced, but much more real. Standing in the right place inside a structure you will never fully control. And while you're there, somewhere else, someone else is beginning. It may be a small apartment, a kitchen table, a late night like one you once had. He is reading a document that most people never even open. Not the summary, not the news article retelling it, but the original. A transcript, a policy statement, an application page. A research program that most people pass by without realizing it exists. He thinks he has just seen a door, a direction, an opportunity, a path that looks clearer than the rest of the world. He thinks he's starting a career. He's entering the same system. There is no real ending here. Only people who are just entering and people who have been inside long enough to stop misunderstanding what it is. If you want to keep going deeper into structures like this, stay. Not to be encouraged, but to see more clearly what is shaping everything.